If you ask the gangsters of 1970s Chicago who the most feared man on the streets was, many would give you the same name, Harry Aleman. Known as Hook for his lethal left hook, Aleman didn't look intimidating at first glance. He was lean, quiet, and not particularly imposing. But in the world of organized crime, his reputation was enough to make anyone think twice before crossing him. Aleman was a mafia enforcer, essentially a tax collector for the Chicago outfit. His job? Making sure bookies and street-level crooks paid their dues. If they refused, he didn't hesitate to use force. Over time, the number of people willing to stand up to him dwindled. Everyone knew what happened to those who resisted: death. Even his name was used as a threat. In 1978, 2 loan sharks were arrested for extorting a tavern owner. They had promised that if he didn't pay up, Harry Aleman himself would come for his soul. But as it turned out, that was a bluff, though one the tavern owner likely believed. The making of a mobster. Harry Aleman was born on January 19, 1939, in Chicago's Taylor Street neighborhood. His mother was Italian, and his father, Louis Aleman, was from Durango, Mexico. Louis had ties to the criminal underworld and was rumored to struggle with drug addiction. He was also a violent man. Despite growing up in a tough environment, Aleman did well in school. He graduated high school in 1955, excelling in soccer, physics, and boxing, where he earned the nickname Hook for his signature punch. He even pursued a degree in commercial painting from the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, but the lure of the streets was too strong. His entry into organized crime came through a family connection. His uncle, Joseph Ferriola, a rising star in the Chicago outfit. Ferriola brought Aleman into his crew, which specialized in sports betting, extortion, and burglaries. From there, Aleman quickly climbed the ranks. A killer with a soft side? As ruthless as Aleman was on the streets, his family saw a different side of him. In 1964, he married Ruth Mustari, a widow with 4 kids. Aleman was the only one allowed to answer the door. One evening, while the family was having dinner, someone knocked loudly. A large man stood outside, complaining that the Aleman kids had scratched his truck. Harry calmly told his wife, "Don't worry about a thing, honey. I'll handle it." Minutes later, he returned to the dinner table, his white t-shirt splattered with blood. When his wife asked what happened, he simply replied, "Everything's fine," and they continued eating. When she asked about it, he told her the man was dangerous and left it at that. The murder of William Logan Aleman's career took a major and irreversible turn in 1972 when he carried out one of his most infamous crimes, the murder of William Logan, a local union official. While the official story behind the killing was that Logan had refused to allow the mob to hijack his trucks, those close to the situation knew there was more to it. For Aleman, this was more than just business. It was personal. In the brutal world of organized crime, disrespect and disobedience were already deadly offenses. But laying hands on a woman in Aleman's family? That was something he simply would not tolerate. Determined to settle the score, Aleman meticulously planned Logan's execution. On the evening of September 27, 1972, he and an associate staked out Logan's home, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The pair remained hidden in the shadows, knowing that their target would eventually emerge. As Logan stepped outside, unaware that his fate had already been sealed, he walked toward his car, likely preoccupied with the routine concerns of his day. Before he could even react, Aleman made his move. Logan collapsed instantly, his body lifeless before it even hit the ground. Despite the boldness of the hit, Aleman believed he had committed the perfect crime. He left no physical evidence behind, no fingerprints, and no shell casings that could be traced back to him. In the lawless world of 1970s Chicago, murders like this were common, and many went unsolved. With his reputation as a ruthless enforcer, it was unlikely that anyone would dare step forward to name him. But there was one problem. Someone had seen everything. A man named Bobby Lowe had been out walking his dog in the neighborhood at the exact moment the shooting took place. From his vantage point, he caught a clear view of Aleman and his associate carrying out the murder. Like many in Chicago, Lowe understood the power of the mob and the danger of crossing them. At first, he chose silence, keeping what he had witnessed to himself out of fear that speaking out could cost him his life. For months, Lowe wrestled with his conscience. He knew what he had seen, and he knew that justice would never be served unless someone spoke up. The weight of the truth became unbearable. Eventually, he decided that he could no longer stay silent. The first trial and a Mafia fix. By 1976, after years of operating with impunity, Aleman was finally indicted for the murder of William Logan. Law enforcement had struggled to build a case against him, but prosecutors now had two key witnesses: Bobby Lowe, the man who had witnessed the execution firsthand, and a former associate of Aleman's who had turned against him. Aleman had deep connections in the criminal underworld, and the mob wasn't about to let one of their top hitmen go down so easily. Through a well-connected mob-affiliated attorney, Aleman's crew orchestrated a shocking act of judicial corruption, but a small price to pay to keep a ruthless killer out of prison. When the trial began, it became clear that Aleman's defense was prepared to aggressively dismantle the prosecution's case. It was a flimsy excuse, but with a bought and paid for judge on the bench, the defense didn't need a perfect story. Judge Wilson played his role flawlessly. He allowed the defense to mercilessly attack the credibility of the witnesses, questioning their motives and reliability. Despite the evidence against Aleman, the judge ultimately ruled in his favor, declaring him not guilty. The verdict sent shockwaves through the city. The public was outraged. It was widely understood that Aleman had committed the murder, but the fix had been in from the start. Chicagoans knew that corruption ran deep in the city, but this case was blatant, even by mob standards. What made matters worse was that Logan's murder was just one of many crimes linked to Aleman. By this point, authorities suspected he had been involved in at least a dozen other killings, yet he remained untouchable. The downfall of Aleman's luck ran out in 1978 when he was arrested under RICO charges for organizing home invasions. He was sentenced to 30 years and spent the next decade behind bars. However, in 1989, he was granted parole. But freedom didn't last long. In 1991, he was convicted again, this time for extorting bookies, and sentenced to another 12 years. Then, in 1993, prosecutors did the unthinkable. They found a way to retry him for Logan's murder. Since new evidence had surfaced about the bribed judge, Aleman was retried and convicted in 1997. He was sentenced to 100 to 300 years in prison. This time, there were no loopholes. Aleman died behind bars in 2010. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.